very good morning to everyone. I, Sajal Mishra, student of DME Media School, welcome you to the pre-conference workshop of the 6th edition of World's first 7-day staggered co-location conference, ICAN 6. This pre-conference workshop is on research, methodology, quantitative data collection. This conference is in collaboration with the School of Communication and Creative Arts, Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia. Sponsored by Indian Council of Social Science Research. This time, ICAN 6 is organized in a staggered format, which will take place at 4 different venues across India and abroad. Phase 1 is in Delhi Metropolitan Education, Noida, and Manav Rachna International Institute of Research and Studies, Faridabad. Phase 2 is in Makhanlal Chaturvedi National University for Journalism and Mass Communication, Bhopal, and Daffodil International University, Bangladesh. ICAN 6 has come with the theme Identity, Culture, Agenda-Driven, and a newscast with the hashtag Cultural Identity for Diversity. Today's conference workshop is Research Methodology, Quantitative Data Collection. This workshop will be conducted by Dr. Jyotika Ramaprasad, Professor at Journalism and Media Management, School of Communication, University of Miami, USA. Her earlier research focused on news flow, media representation, and advertising. Her recent interests are in journalism studies and social and behavioral change communication. Almost all of Jyotika ma'am's past and current work is international in orientation spanning Africa, Asia, and Europe. She has also been a Fulbright scholar at Indian Institute of Communication and a Fulbright specialist in Germany and South Africa. In the area of journalism studies, Dr. Ramaprasad is part of 2 major collaborative projects, the BRICS Media System project funded by Academy of Finland and the Worlds of Journalism study funded by various sources. I now request Dr. Amrish Saxena, Dean DME Media School, and Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School, to kindly felicitate our guest, Dr. Jyotika Ramaprasad.
This is the best gift to get these days, isn't it? Plants. We've ruined our environment. This is what all of us need to be doing, planting lots of different trees. So thank you so much. Thank you.
I now request Dr. Amrish Saxena to kindly address the gathering and throw some light on this pre-conference workshop.
So welcome everybody to this pre-conference session of ICAN. ICAN is formally starting on 19th of June and will go on in the first leg till 22nd, and then obviously, as it has already been told, the second leg will be in July and August in Bhopal and Dhaka. So before that, this workshop is happening because since every time we were having it for 7 days at a stretch, and this time that has been reduced to 4 days, so it was not possible to accommodate all the sessions the way we do it and the way we spread different sessions, workshops, plenaries, master classes, and panel discussions. So that is how we have organized this session before the conference is starting. And we are really obliged that Professor Jyotika Ramaprasad has come all the way from the US to attend this workshop, to take this workshop and to attend the international conference and to be our guest in the inaugural function of the conference. And she has spare time today to interact with you all and to give you all that input which is required as part of this research workshop, which is on quantitative data collection, but also in the backdrop of the research that she has undertaken that I told you already about this Worlds of Journalism study. So which she has been handling for many years, and a lot of data is to be collected from different countries, and in India also from different cities the data is to be collected. So you people will be in the field for the collection of data as guided, as trained by Professor Ramaprasad. So that is how this workshop is going to be of lot of significance for each one of you, and I am sure that this will bring good results as far as your academic learning and research learning is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to inform you that ICAN 6 is sponsored by Indian Council of Social Science Research, and our conference partners are ICMR Gen Section, GMAC Global Media Education Council. Our knowledge partners for ICAN 6 are Manav Rachna International Institute for Research and Studies, Faridabad, Makhanlal Chaturvedi University for Journalism and Mass Communication, Bhopal, Adamas University, Kolkata, Institute of Applied Medicine and Research, Ghaziabad, Keshav Suri Foundation. Our international partners for ICAN 6 are Daffodil International University, Bangladesh, Institute for International Journalism, Ohio University, USA, Beacon House, National University, Pakistan. Media partners for ICAN 6 are The Policy Times, Jai Hind Times, Quick News, News 44. ICAN 6 is powered by Indian Media and Cultural Studies Network, Australia, Australia-India Film Practitioner and Researchers Network Australia, SPARK, the student body of DME Media School, RIM, Research and Innovation in Media, Research Cell of DME, Richmond Fellowship Society, Delhi branch. Now I request Dr. Jitika Ramaprasad to kindly take this the session forward, as we are very curious to know more on this project.
So, good afternoon and namaste to all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to, spend an hour with me today. And I would like to thank very much Professor Ambrish Saxena and Ma'am Sushmita Bala for inviting me to talk to all of you. It's really my pleasure to do this. I know very often we think about the fact that when you have a speaker who comes, that it's of benefit to the students, right? But I want you to also know that it's also there's a benefit in it for the speaker also. So this is a two-way kind of, a gift for each other. So I just want to let you know I'm very grateful for the fact that you have given me this gift of being able to talk to all of you today. So this is not my first time in DME. I loved my previous visit here, and that's why I'm back. And you'll probably see me again and again if I continue to be in the good graces of, the powers that are sitting right there. But today we are going to talk not so much about me and you, but we're going to talk about research, right? So you're all studying journalism, yeah? So why do you need to be interested in research? I can wait for a very long time for an answer, believe me. I've learned that. I've taught for decades. So yeah, go ahead.
Because fake news is actually research-based news much better than fake news.
Right. So first of all, as any journalist should know, and you probably know, or you will soon know if you're first year and haven't taken too many classes yet, is that you have to really, really study, understand, and know where that information is coming from, right? So that you're not sending out fake information to the public who trusts you, because why do we have news? We have news to inform the citizens of our country so that they can make a very informed decision when it comes to voting, right? Because we are in a democracy here in India, right? So if our citizens are not well informed, then maybe their choices are not going to be well informed. And if their choices are not well informed, maybe it impacts the way we are governed, right? So you have a very, very important role. I hope you understand and realize that, okay? That this is not a job or a task or a learning or an education that doesn't have vast societal implications, yeah? So that's the first thing I want to talk to you about, is just how important it is what you're learning and what your future is going to be about. Don't ever forget that, because you are producers of information, or you will become producers of information. And there's an immense amount of power that is invested, or vested I should say, in producers, right? So if you become a journalist or a filmmaker, or you're in advertising, whatever, you are going to produce content that's going to influence other people. That is a pretty powerful position to be in. I hope you realize that. You can make or break somebody's life by doing bad journalism, right? you can really impact young females' health by doing advertising that portrays them in a certain way, right? You can create community tension by creating a film that doesn't show peace but shows conflict, right? So I want you to understand that you as journalists are going to be in very powerful positions, and don't ever take that lightly, all right? And so research is something you need to know about. Now the kind of research you're going to do for journalism is a little bit different from what I'm going to talk about today, but some of these principles are very valid, right? They're going to also be important for the kind of research you will do when you try to get information for your story. For example, I'm going to talk mostly today about sampling in research. And so how does it apply to journalism? It applies in the sense that if you do not get a representative set of opinions when you do your research for your journalistic story, you're telling a very one-sided story, aren't you? Yeah? So you want to make sure you represent well the opinions of a lot of people. In the quantitative research that we're going to talk about today, it's the same principle. That if I want to, let's say a very silly, simple example, if I want to find out what is the height of, let's say, my University of Miami students, because I want to build new buildings and want to make sure the doors are the right height, what would you say to me, even without having a research methods class, if I went to the basketball court and I took the height of all the basketball players and I said, this is the average height of students in the University of Miami? What is your criticism of that, of the sample that I picked to figure out what is the average height of a University of Miami student? Yeah, huh?
Ma'am, we are paying the wrong sample here actually, and very small sample, because if you're going only at the basketball court, the players will be around 20 to 50, max to max 50. But all of the students will be more than 10,000, so a very small sample would be inadequate.
Exactly. So the sample size is very important, right? If you take a very small sample. Okay, now I want you to think about the variable that I'm measuring. I'm trying to measure height. What do you know about the height of basketball players?
They are quite tall.
They are tall, right? Yeah. So first of all, the size is important. Secondly, I've picked a very biased sample, haven't I? And then I go to the university and say, make sure your doors are very high. It's going to cost the university a lot of money because they're going to add 6 inches to their doors, right? And it's all because I had faulty data. I picked a sample that was not representative. Got it? Any questions? You understand the idea of representation? Yeah? Okay. So I'm here today because Professor Ambrish Saxena is what we call the principal investigator of a research study that we are going to do, which is called the Worlds of Journalism Research Study. Okay? And as Professor Saxena described to you, this is a study that is based in Germany, and it has people all over the world. We have like about 100 countries right now who have signed up to collect data in their own countries about journalists. And this is just to make sure that we have India represented in that data set. I mean, journalism in India is one of the biggest things, right? I mean, the rest of the world doesn't have the kind of journalism we have here, right? We have a vast journalism setup, isn't it? So diverse, right? So many languages, so many rural and urban papers, right? So many dialects, right? So it would be a shame if India was not represented in the world in what the journalists' opinions are, right? And that's the purpose of the study. And Professor Ambrish Saxena is the principal investigator, and I'm just helping him out to do some training, because I worked on this study in the past, and to do some training in the kind of sampling that needs to be done for this project. And that is where all of you come in. right? You are going to go out and be our data collectors, and first, before you be our data collectors, you're going to do sampling. And you're not going to go to the basketball court, right, if you're measuring height. Got it? You're going to make sure we get a really good representative sample. All right. So that is what I basically want to talk about today. But before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit conceptually about what sampling is before we talk about this particular study. All right. So sampling, in sampling we do what's called probability and non-probability sampling. Yeah. Probability sampling is based on the idea that every sample has an equal chance of being selected, right? When I went to the basketball court, did I give every sample an equal chance of being selected? No, right? So I have to make sure that I give every sample an equal chance of being selected. So all of the people that we want to study, in this particular case it was the University of Miami students, right? They are my population. They are the whole group of people that I want to study, and they're called the population. That makes sense? Everyone, are you all with me? Yes? Yeah? Okay. So University of Miami students are my population, and I have to pick a sample from them. And you're going to tell me, Dr. Ramprasad, please don't go to the basketball court if you want to measure their heights, right? You are going to pick what's called a probability sample. And a probability sample, as I just told you, is what? Who remembers what I just said? Every sample has equal opportunity to be selected. So your bias or your convenience or your comfort should not play a role in it. Got it? Research is not comfortable, okay? Journalism is not comfortable. You have to work hard for it. Agree? Yes? So don't think about what is the convenient thing to do, all right, or what's the easy thing to do. Yeah? Now some of you, I understand, were here when I came last year. Any one of you from that time? You were there? All of you were there. So you've heard some of this before, but just to review for you and new information for all of these wonderful new students that I see, so young with your whole life in front of you, right? Make your life worth something, right? That's the message I want to give you all ultimately. So when you are involved in probability-based sampling, there are many ways in which you can sample. So let's assume for a moment, to make it very simple, you are my population. It's a very small population. You are the people I want to study. So I can go to these two people here and say, you're on my sample, and all of you will say, no, that's not okay. You just went to the two closest people to you because you wanted to make it easy for yourself. It's not okay. So I'm going to pick where every sample of two people, let's say my sample size is 2, gets a chance to be picked. So you and you can form a sample, you and she can form a sample, you and she can form a sample, you and she can form, and can you keep repeating that? We'll have hundreds of samples of 2 people. Got it? All right. So to do that, one of the simplest things we can do is we can get a big glass bowl. I can take all your names, put it on same size paper, write in the same ink, close it up, put it in that, and pick out, let's say, 2 people. That's too small a sample size, as we were just told by you, right? That was too small, so maybe we'll increase the sample to 5, let's say. And then we mix it up and we say, can you please pick 1 piece of paper? Then I mix it up again, I go to somebody else, can you pick? We get 5 names, and that becomes my sample. That's a legitimate way to do sampling, all right? It's called simple random sampling. It's like the lottery, isn't it? Yeah? So think of it, simple random sampling is like the lottery. Good, everyone? Yeah? So But that method has a few problems with it sometimes. Because what happens is, let's assume for a moment that, and I can see that here we have a lot more female students here than we have male students, right? Simple random sampling can sometimes lead to the issue of over or under representation of a particular group. And what would we just say? We want good representation. Yeah? So the next way we can do it, which is a little bit better, I would say quite a bit better, is that I can say we are going to have two bowls. And one of those bowls is going to have all the female students' names, and the other bowl is going to have what? All the male students' names, right? Then I'm going to say, okay, I think 10% of the sample of the population, is males and 90% is females. So what am I going to do if our sample size, I'm going to change my sample size just to make it a little easy. Let's say I wanted to pick 10 people. How many names am I going to pick from the female bowl or jar? 9, right? Because 90%, yeah, so 90% of 10 is 9, yeah? And sorry guys, but you get only one person representing you because you formed only 10% of my population, all right? I do tend to favor women, by the way, just in case you don't know that. No, you can't do that in sampling, okay? So that is called a stratified random sample. So you've learned two words or two technical words today. One is simple random sampling, which is like picking a lottery, right? And what was the name I just said? Stratified sampling. Coming from the word strata. What does the word strata mean? Groups, very good, yeah, dividing, classifying. And what did we just classify in that case? Males from females. So we classified by gender, right? But it doesn't always have to be gender, right? It's a variable that's important for your study, yeah? If it was height, I would have maybe 3 groups: tall people, medium height people and short people. And if there were a lot more medium height people, if I wanted a proportional sample, I would pick more from the medium height people. Got it, everyone? Up there? Up there? Any questions? No? Sure? Questions? No questions? All right, so we just learned simple random sampling and stratified sampling. There's a third sampling method that I'm going to share with you. And again, remember, if I'm not clear, if I'm not explaining something, you can interrupt me and ask me questions, or you can say, please explain that again. And that's perfectly okay. All right? So the third method is called systematic sampling. Let's review the names. What was the first name? The first simple one was simple, and that's like a lottery, right? The second one, and what do we do in that?
We take a variable that is important to our research, and then we stratify the population according to that.
According to the proportion in the population, we stratify and pick a sample according to the proportion. Got it? And the third one, there are many other methods, but these are the 3 I'm going to talk about today, is systematic sampling. Okay? So in systematic sampling, we usually use it when we have a list of the population. Got that? So let's say I have like 20,000 students in University of Miami. And it's going to be really difficult for me unless I have a method that makes it a little bit easier for me. And I go to the registrar's office and I say, can you give me a list of all the 20,000 students, right? And I'm going to make it a smaller population just so that we can do the calculations more easily. But instead of 20,000, let's say I have 100 in my population. But this is usually used with a very long list, okay? So just remember that. So I have 100 names on this list that the registrar gives me, and I want a sample of 10. Okay? Got it? So I want a sample that is 10% of my population. Is that clear? 10 out of 100 is 10%, right? Yes? Okay. So I tend to be very interactive, by the way. So today I'm lecturing a little more than I usually do. Usually I'm much more interactive. But so pardon me if you're not used to this constant, you know, looking at you and asking you whether you understand, because that's how I teach. I follow somebody who was a Brazilian educator. Where's Brazil, by the way? Know the world. Another lesson for a journalist, for all of us. Which part of the world is Brazil from? Where is Brazil? The country of Brazil? South America, very good. It's a huge country in South America with a fantastic rainforest in it, which of course is being destroyed, right? Because of people who want to make money all the time, right? That we have people like that all over the world. What was I talking about? So in a systematic sample, we took a population of 100, right?
20,000 you said?
Yeah, but I reduced it to 100 so that we could do easier calculations, right? So I got this list of 100, but I have no idea why I mentioned Brazil. Why did I mention Brazil?
Because you follow him. The education.
Of course. The most important point I was going to make. The educator from Brazil, his name is Paulo Freire. He's passed away, of course. And he wrote a book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Am I boring all of you up there? No? Am I boring you? Anyone? Okay. The pedagogy of the oppressed, the word pedagogy means how do you teach? And oppressed people are marginalized people, people who in every society has people that we oppress, all right? And so that's why I said, be very careful about the power we have, okay? Evaluate all your actions as a human being and as a journalist in terms of how you're using your power, okay? Because we are constantly oppressing other people, all right? So he was an educator who was working with the peasants in Brazil, all right? Peasants are what we call farmers here, right? And they were pretty oppressed, right? It was something like the landlord system we had here. Remember in the long back, we had huge landowners and they had people who worked for them, and those people never were able, if you know Indian history, you know that never able to get out of debt, right? They were always indebted to their landlord because they could never return enough, right? So peasants were in a very similar situation in Brazil, and he came up with this way of educating them, or pedagogy, where he said, we need to raise the consciousness of the oppressed people. To make them realize their state of oppression, okay, and to make them understand that they know also that knowledge is not something that only we have, right? I mean, we have this very elitist notion that only we, the people who have money, to some extent middle class or whatever, you know, not the oppressed people, or we have some education, we think we know everything. You go to a villager, they know so much more than we ever know about which plant to eat when you have a stomach ache and when you have, you know, a headache or whatever, right? All this traditional medicinal knowledge is not from you and me in modern world, it came from our ancestors, right? And to think that we know more than them is to be very, very oppressive in our way of thinking. Remember, oppression can happen not just physically, but also through your mind, right? So what he believed is you raise the consciousness of these people, and the way you do it is through dialogue, not through top-down lecturing. So I don't like to just stand in one place and just lecture to you and keep talking in a monotone, and soon all of you are fast asleep and I'm continuing to talk, right? So that's the way I teach. I dialogue a lot, but today I'm kind of not doing as much dialogue as I would like to, simply because I have a lot to cover in the 1 hour of your time that you've given me. Okay? So, going back to research methods away from Paulo Freire, his work is a little difficult to read, but if you want to read it, there are English translations of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, or at least you can Google him and find out a little bit about him. Of course, what happened was he was put in prison by the Brazilian government, right? Because they did not want the peasants to rise up, right? People who are in power always want to keep other people down there, right? Isn't it? We need to examine our own lives to see how much we do that, okay? And as a journalist, you really need to think about these issues, yeah? Does it make sense? Women in most societies have a second-class status, right? It is changing in many parts of the world, but we are still not there. So all the men in this room, when you're journalists, you need to keep that in mind when you write stories about women, right? Most male journalists are not interested in writing about women's issues. But don't remember, the person who gave birth to you was a woman, right? So we enact oppression in many different ways, and I have to constantly tell myself that too. I'm not any better than anybody else. I'm not trying to say I'm a good human being. I'm just trying to say that we all have to keep that in mind. And so in my lecturing, I do a lot of dialogue, and I'm not able to do that today because of time constraints, but please feel free to kind of ask me questions or to disagree with me. You know, you could all disagree with me and say, no, women have to be second-class citizens. And we might have a little uprising here in this room, right, from all the women students. Won't you rise up if somebody ever said that to you? Good for you. All right. And none of the males, my gosh, these wonderful male students in this class would never say that, right? Would you ever say that? Would you ever think that? That's a more important question. Let me hear it from all of you. Would you ever think that a woman is less important than you? Not very convincing. Oh, come on, guys. What do you think? Do you think women are less important than you? No. Say it with some conviction, please. No. I want a loud no from all of you.
No. No.
From all the males. One last chance I'm giving you. Yes or no?
No, ma'am.
All right. So to go back to what I'm really here for, okay? But I cannot help talking about oppression and about the environment. Any talk I give, I bring those two things in, right? Like I did when I got the beautiful plant, right? That's your responsibility as a journalist and as a human being. We have destroyed the planet. You young people, we are leaving you a really bad planet. You know, I'm not going to be around in this earth for a very long time now. I mean, you know, most of my life is behind me. You're the ones who have to make sure that you, as a human being and as a journalist, you work for the environment. This is a beautiful country. You don't want to destroy it. You want to keep it. Okay, that part is over now. Let's go back to research methods, okay? So you can, by the way, cut all this out, okay? I know it's not relevant to the research methods lecture when you do your production, but okay, so we're back to systematic sampling, yeah? So we have this list of 100 students, and we want to take a 10% sample, so we need to pick 10 students. So what we do is we just calculated 100 divided by 10 is 10, right? So what we do is we know that we have to pick every 10th student on that list. But it's not that simple. We don't start with number 1 and then go to number 11. We ask somebody and say, can you please pick me a number between 1 and 10? Can you pick me a number between? 6? Okay, perfectly good. So I start with number 6. So the 6th person on that list becomes the first person in my sample. Got it? Yeah? We're going to skip 10. So what is the next person in my sample? Number 16. Thank you. And the person after that? 26 and 36, and you'll end up having 10 people in your sample. That's called systematic sampling. Got it? In this particular project in the worlds of journalism, we are first going to ask you to go to different, each one of you is going to go to a different organization, and I think we're going to partner 2 people so that you have somebody else going with you to an organization. So you're going to go to that organization, and Professor Ambrish Saxena and Professor Mansvi Maheshwari are going to facilitate that. And you remember, we're going to do this in about 20 different cities in India. But you are a test case, all right? So you have a bigger burden than anybody else. Are you ready for that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because we are going to see what works and what doesn't work when we send you out into the field. And from that, we're going to learn, and we're going to apply that to the other cities. Got that? Okay, so you're going to go there, and let's say the 2 of you are going to go to Times of India. Just making that up, okay? They will tell you where you have to go. You're going to go there, the contact person, you're going to ask, can you please give me a list of everybody who works here who's a journalist? We're not going after people who do PR, we don't want people who are in sales, who are any of that. Journalists starting all the way from, if the publisher, if it's a small paper or a small outlet, then maybe the publisher is very much a part of that organization. Sometimes the publisher is just someone you never know or hear about, right? So depending on the organization, you could have a publisher, you could have a managing editor, you could have the editor. So you're going to put these people, ask this person, your contact person, to give that list to you. You're going to be helping each other to write it very quickly, and you're going to put it in 3 levels. The senior management, the middle management or junior management, and then the rank and file journalist, meaning the journalist or the reporter who actually goes out every day and gets a story and writes it up. You know, and these days you know that people just don't do one kind of journalism. You just don't write. You might have to take photographs, you might have to do the online part of the story, right? You're kind of multimedia these days, right? So we have 3 ranks now. You went to Times of India, you got a list of, let's say, 20 people in that organization in these 3 categories. What did we just do? I'm sorry? Yeah, you will get an entire printout which has all of these details in it.
Shall I ask to open those questions?
Not yet. I'll just finish and then we'll show them. Got it? So you'll get all that. It's a senior, the middle, and we have definitions of each one of them, and the rank and file journalist. So you will get all of that stuff in a printed statement, okay? So something that you can refer to. So you've got these 20 journalists, a list of their names, and then we want to make sure there's, so what did we just do? We stratified, right? All of you get that? We stratified, and we stratified by rank. Very good, thank you, right? Not by gender, because that's not important. Rank is important, right? So we stratified by rank, and now from within each rank we're going to pick. And we talked about proportions. So do you think we'll pick, usually senior management is very few people, middle management might be a little bit more, and most people are in the rank and file journalists. So are we going to pick the most people from senior management? No, ma'am. Thank you. Very good. You're going to pick the most people from the group that has the most on the list, right? And in that case, what you're going to do is, let's say you have the list, right? The 2 of you are going, right, to Times of India. You have the list. You're going to keep that away from her where she can't see it. When all of you can both of you can get the list together and write it down. Then you're going to put numbers on that list in a way where she doesn't know whether the first person has number 1 or 2 or whatever. You can start with 2 and 3 and then go to 9 and whatever down the list. And let's say the first 3 senior management people, you've given them number 1, 7 and 20, let's say. I'm just making them up. and you ask her pick 1 out of 1, 7 and 20, and she picks 20. That's the person who goes into your sample. So what did we just do? We stratified, and within the strata we use simple random sampling. Make sense? Yeah? So we combined 2, and we also got a list, right? We could have done it systematically, but most organizations are not going to have such a long list that you need to use that systematic sampling. We are stratifying, and within each strata we are picking using a simple random sample. So, you're combining 2 ways of sampling. All clear? Yes? Everyone? Good? So, you are a test case, okay, the 2 of you. If you mess up, you're in big trouble, right? Okay, so then you do that repeatedly with her. Let's say you have 3 people or 4 people in middle management. You've given them numbers 5, 25, 35 and whatever. You ask her to pick from those. Maybe 1 person, because again, we don't want to over-represent the management. And let's say the rest of them are all in the rank and file. And for your own sanity, just number them like, sequentially, so she remembers. You can say, well, pick 5 numbers between 8 and 15. Make sure that they're not the same numbers you've given to the first, okay? Because if you start numbering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then she knows who was number 1 because she's seen the list, right? Did you see why I'm asking her to randomly assign numbers? Yes, because a partner has seen the list. And she said, oh, number 1 is a friend of mine, so I'm going to pick him so that he'll finish my questionnaire. Can't do that, okay? That's biased, right? When you pick a friend, it's like going to the basketball court, right? Yeah? Okay. So that's a huge responsibility. I hope you realize how important that part of the job is. And along with that, you're going to collect that person's email and their phone number, okay? And what we are also going to do is we're going to pick a replacement for each category, right? But they will be secondary. So you can come up with your own system. You can put an R next to their name, whatever. Each one can pick their own system. Because let's say the first person you picked among the 3 senior management people does not respond even after 2 times of reminders, then you go to the replacement person. So make sure for everyone who's selected and for every replacement person you've selected, all using probability sampling methods, you get their email and their phone number. Got it? Yeah? Questions, anyone? Any questions? No? Questions? No? All good? Yes, ma'am. Okay. And that is the information you're going to bring to Professor Mansvi. And then she's going to put that information in some kind of software and send off the questionnaire using the email address. It won't be the question, it will be a link to the software. And they can complete it online because I think most people now do have internet in India. And I can't imagine a journalist who wouldn't have the internet, right? Yeah? This is much easier than having to do paper questionnaires. That's how we had to do it in the previous phase when I was the PI, I was the main person. I did not know Dr. Saxena at that time. This was about 10 years ago. I was literally walking the streets in Delhi and Bombay and all of the cities, knocking on doors and I didn't know anybody, and they would shut the door on my face, and I would know that they're inside, but they wouldn't answer, it was just like such a tough experience. But that is what research is, and if you're going into journalism and you don't want to do difficult things, stop right now and go find another college. That's what and I'm not being facetious, I'm really telling you, if you want to be a good journalist, you have to work hard, okay? You have to go and find that story that's important, and you have to get that story right, because you are going to affect people's lives. Similarly, in the project, in any research, we don't want to send out information that's going to be published based on the data that doesn't give an accurate impression about the journalism in India, right? So you understand why sampling is so important now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah? All right. So that's what you're going to do, and we'll do a we have a whole field manual which will explain to you who's a journalist. We have a what is called in research and quantitative, we call it a filter question. One of the first questions will be, is at least 50% of your income coming from your journalism position? Because if they are only doing, like let's say they're doing mostly advertising and 10% of the time they're doing journalism, that's not the kind of journalists we want. We want journalists who are really journalists, okay? So in that filter question, if they say 75% is coming, 55% is from, they are included, they become part of the sample. I mean, we want to send them a questionnaire. If they say, I'm a very wealthy person, 90% of my money comes because I have this business and only 10%, we don't want people that. Not that they're not doing good journalism, but they're not really what we call full-time journalists who are really dedicated to the profession. Got it? Okay? So there's that filter question, and then we go on further. Okay? So this is really an important task. It's really important that you do it that way. So can we show them very quickly the questionnaire? I'm not going to show it. We are translating it, by the way, into 4 different languages. It's translated into Hindi here for Delhi. So we'll have English and Hindi versions, so that depending on if you're going to a Hindi outlet, you use the, Professor Mansvi will send the Hindi questionnaire to the journalists, okay? All right. So I'm not going to talk about this fully. It is a long questionnaire, by the way. All right. So you have to be very, very good about how you approach the contact, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so we can just move up to the questions. Is it okay if I move far behind, near there for your production? Yeah? Okay. So we start with very simple questions. You know, what kind of contract do you have, for example? We can keep scrolling. The blue questions are the ones that are optional, but we are going to make them all required. Okay, so there are some countries where they're not going to use all the questions. We are going to use all the questions, so none of them will be in blue and black. When you finally get it, it will all be, or the questionnaire you will finally see that you won't send out, that Professor Mansvi will actually send out, will all be black. Okay, so these are very simple questions, as you can see, so we can keep going. Okay, now this is our filter question, this one. This will go way up on the top. If they say 50% or more, that person gets the questionnaire, and if they say less than 50%, then that person doesn't get the questionnaire. But that's a decision Professor Maheshwari will make, but this will be the question that will go way up on the top. And then we continue, you know, we continue with very simple questions like, do you also work in other things like advertising and PR and so on? Can keep going. What organizations do you belong to? And now this is something else that I wanted to explain to you, because what I'm doing here is not just talking to do this project. I also want you to take away something that's for you if you do a research project for your studies here. These are called Likert scale statements. And what we will do is, this is like, what is your role as a journalist? Be a detached observer, and then next to it we'll put extremely important, very important, and so on. And they will pick that. If they think this is a very important thing for a journalist, they will click on extremely important. That makes sense? So it's called a Likert scale, 5-point Likert scale, because they have 5 choices. And it's called Likert because the person who came up with this method, his last name was Likert. Okay? So these are just things that a journalist generally does, but naturally each journalist will think some things are more important than others, right? So they will answer these questions about what their roles are. This is called the roles question. Okay, you won't actually have to get these completed unless there's somebody who insists that they want a paper question, in which case you'll have to go back and sit with them and get this completed. Okay, Then we have some questions on ethics, just general questions on ethics. You can keep scrolling. These are also general questions on ethics. Yeah. And then we go on. So something that's become extremely important these days is the safety of journalists. I don't know whether you read about that. All over the world, journalists are being targeted, right? They are being, I mean, if you go to Mexico and some of these countries, Mexico has very large drug groups, right? So if you write a negative story about any particular drug group, your life is generally threatened, okay? So Mexico is one of those countries where a lot of journalists have been killed, okay? And even if it doesn't go as far as killing, there are many other ways in which journalists can be harassed, right? And these days, with the fact that we have technology, they can do cyberbullying. Female journalists get a lot of other kind of harassment because, you know, I mean, they'll try to threaten your children or something like that. And, you know, so this has become a very big issue. These are new questions that we did not have in our previous questionnaires in the previous phases. So, for example, have you ever had demeaning or hateful speech directed at you, or publicly discrediting your work, or so on? And then they answer very often, sometimes rarely or never. Our hope, of course, is that journalists are not being harassed, right? Isn't it? Would you don't want to be harassed, you're just doing your job when you go out to do a story, isn't it? But unfortunately, in many countries, there is a lot of harassment that's happening, all right? I'm hoping in India we find that it's not very widespread as compared to some of the other countries, okay? So there are a whole bunch of questions on safety, all right? And then if you have had these things happen to you, who has helped you? So we ask that question, you know, have you got support from your news organization, from other colleagues? And more research, we are finding that journalists come together and they support each other when harassment happens, okay? So that they have strength from each other to continue to do the work that's important. So if you have drug cartels and people in Mexico, young people are getting into drugs because of the fact that drugs are easily available, journalists want to write about it, right? Because it's destroying your society. But they're putting their life at risk. And so on. This is again about, you know, naturally if you're being bullied or harassed. Now, also some of these questions may not be as, I'll get to you, thank you for asking, for being ready to ask a question, may not be relevant in India, but remember this questionnaire is being used in 100 different countries, okay? So when we prepared this questionnaire, we had to think about every possible country that could join the project. Question? Thank you. Question? Somebody had their hand raised.
How can emotional approach help in sampling? Emotional approach help in sampling?
Emotional approach help in sampling? Right. Good question. I was actually going to come to that. So,
because like in sampling, you have to have a practical approach rather than emotional.
Well, so even in sampling, you have to have a practical approach, definitely. But remember that unless you establish a good emotional rapport with that contact person, that person is not going to be very helpful to you. So that's part of what I was going to get to, but I'm glad you brought it up, that when you walk in with grace and with a professionalism, right? You are asking somebody for their time and their support and their help. Don't take that lightly. That person's time is as valuable as your time. Be very respectful, you know how to ask in a way where that person feels that, okay, this project is important, I do want to help, okay? So there is we have a field manual which gives you some language you can use, but every culture is different, and I'm fortunate that I was born here, so I understand Indian culture. We have our own ways, and maybe the way you would approach in Delhi would be maybe very different from the way you might approach in a smaller town, right? So even though the contact person might be somebody that Professor Saxena or Professor Maheshwari knows, you still want to be very professional and very graceful, right? That defines you as a human being, doesn't it? How you approach people, how you talk to them, right? So please remember that when you walk in, use that approach, that emotional approach, that we're here, we have come to request your time. We'd be very grateful if you would give us, maybe half an hour of your time to help us with this project. We believe in journalism, we believe it's important, and we want Indian journalists' views to be represented worldwide about what Indian journalists think, because this project is collecting data on people all across the world. Why would India, the world's largest democracy, with such a strong large journalistic workforce, why would they not be included? It would be a shame if we... So use that approach. Good question. Okay, got it? So I won't go through the whole questionnaire because the chances are that once you pick the sample, you're handing it over to Professor Maheshwari, and then unless there's somebody who's really not replying and completing it, you will not have to go back to that outlet with a print questionnaire. But if sometimes somebody says, no, I prefer that you give me a paper questionnaire, then you go there, ask them what time they'll be available, you go back and you sit there for that whatever time they're available, and for that half an hour it takes them, you sit there and let them complete the questionnaire, and then you bring it back and give it, okay? Now the other important thing about research I want to talk to you about before I can finish, and I'm probably already running out of time. When you teach, when you're a teacher, you can talk for a long time, and I love what I do, so I could come and finish this in 15 minutes, but I really enjoy what I do. She's getting ready to get rid of me. I can see that. I'll finish, I promise. So, yeah, so what was I talking about?
You were talking about questionnaires and the way we approach.
Yeah, the way you approach it is very, very important. And if you have to go back, I know what I wanted to say. And the way you approach, and remember, one of the most important things as a researcher, okay, is you respect the confidentiality and anonymity. You are not, the two of you are not going to go to the rest of your classmates and say, this particular person was selected, or that is information that only the two of you have and Professor Maheshwari has, okay? We always, in any research we do, we always are very, very careful about telling them that this is confidential. It may be a very simple question asking how many years are you studying, or what profession are you studying, or whatever. It doesn't matter. We always promise them confidentiality. And remember always to tell them, in fact, there'll be a whole letter from Professor Ambrish Saxena, and there'll be a consent form. When the data is finally put together, nothing will be in the data. Their names, their addresses, their phone numbers, even the organization they worked for and the city will not be there. This is really important for you to tell them, okay? At this point, why do we need that information? Because if we have to follow up with them, if they've not completed the questionnaire, we need it to be able to follow up. But that final data set that will go to Germany, and which will then be cleaned up to make sure there are no mistakes, then that is sent out to all the 100 different countries who are participating. It will have like a code for the country. Last time, like India was 33. The only people who know that code will be the 100 countries' principal investigators. Got it? And there will be nothing, like if it's Times of India, there will be some code given to Times of India that only Professor Maheshwari knows. It will be locked up in her cabinet. Even I will not know that. Professor Saxena will not know that. Nobody will know that. It's extremely important that you protect people who give you information. It's just like journalism, right? You don't reveal your source if they're giving you some information that, and this is not information that is secretive. I mean, there's nothing about this which is secretive, right? But still, we always in research protect the You know, so that's another thing you need to promise them all. And all the letters that will be written will give that information. But you say that, I mean, I will be thrown out of my university if I ever do something that is unethical in my research. And I'm not exaggerating, it's absolutely true. Okay? And this is a principle that I hope you will always remember in your life as a journalist, as a human being, that everybody's life is important, you know, and you want to make sure that you work with them as fellow colleagues or fellow students or whatever, rather than as somebody who now has the power because you have the names of the journalists that were selected. That will immediately become a very big negative mark against you. Okay? All right? Well, thank you so much for listening to me. I appreciate your time and, you know, wish you good luck. And remember that, you know, your future is ahead of you. Whatever you do, make good use of your life, all right? And don't forget your environment, okay? India is important. Remember, India's environment is important, all right?
With this, we come to the conclusion of this pre-conference workshop. My foremost and heartfelt thanks to our expert, Dr. Jyotika Ramaprasad, for sharing her valuable insights, teaching our students research methodology, quantitative data collection. Sincere thanks to management of DME, Aman Sahani, Vice Chairman, Justice Bhavar Singh, Director General, Professor Dr. Ravikant Swami, Director, for their support in every endeavor being taken up by DME Media School. Heartfelt thanks to Dean, DME Media School, Professor Dr. Amrish Saxena, Head Media School, Professor Dr. Susmita Bala, for their motivation and planning in executing the flagship event of Media School. Thanks to Dr. Manasvi Maheshwari, Associate Professor, and Dr. Pramod Kumar Pandey, Assistant Professor and Associate Convener of ICAN 6, for overall coordination for the International Media Conference. Thanks to Mr. Madhav Sharma, Dr. Anupam Kumar, Assistant Professors, and Yogesh Sharma, Mayank, Abhijit, Faculty at Media School, for digital and production support for ICAN 6. Thanks to Dr. Manmeet Kaur, Associate Professor and Academic Coordinator, for her efforts in supporting ICAN 6. Thanks to Dr. Ritika Bora and Piyusha Sharma, Assistant Professors, Media School, for managing technical and cultural team along with student coordination. Dr. Pramod Kumar Pandey, Assistant Professor, for newsletter, press briefings, and media coordination support. Ashish Chatterjee, Assistant Professor, for designing and creative support. Vishal Sahai and Garima Jain for their support with social media management. Priya Yadav for her consistent support in ICAN 6. I also thank administrative staff of DME. Special thanks to our conference partners, knowledge partners, international partners, and media partners. Thanks to everybody for being a lovely audience. And now with this, we will now be meeting again for inaugural ceremony of ICAN 6, which is on Monday 19th. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you all downstairs now.